Hey, this is Jose Galison of No Way Jose. You can find me on the No Way Jose YouTube channel. You can also find me anywhere podcasts are at. Today, my guest is Jeremy Todd, the fucking Unity bro, one of the dudes from the Unity Coalition. That's probably where you know him from. Today, the kind of rough topic. We're going to be kind of talking sort of about messaging. He wanted to talk a lot about like the Overton window and how that relates to it. He kind of mentioned something on Twitter about that, and I was like, hell yeah, I'll have you on. As always, if we get into it, give me money. Patreon.com/NoWayJose2020. This will probably be, as always, on most of my episodes, usually wait a week or two before I release them, just because I like to be able to control when I release my shit, and I like money. So if you want to fucking see the shit when it comes out, fucking go do that. If not, whatever, I don't give a shit. Also, go check out TopLobsta. I've got my stuff up there if you want to get some merch. I mean, also, he's just got good shit. I have some on the way, just waiting for it to get here. With that, I'm going to bring on Jeremy.
Hell
What
yeah.
the fuck's up, dude?
What the fuck is up? What a great intro, man. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's super professional, but it is what it is.
Hey, what works?
Yeah, so I know a lot of people, we were kind of talking in pre, and a lot of people probably don't really know who the fuck you are, what you're about.
Yeah.
So just kind of, if you want to give an intro of who you are.
Yeah.
And because we were joking in pre, it's kind of like you kind of popped up and like, who the fuck is this guy? What does he do?
Guy?
Like, everyone, like, does this guy have a podcast? No. Somehow he's with all these podcast people. Like, who is this dude?
Yeah. I guess. I mean, I'm just dude from Twitter, man. I became a libertarian years ago. Last year, Kickass started the No Libertarian Under 1K. So, like, I hopped on board with that because I don't know what are the feds going to do to me, I guess. And so I did all that, and then just like everybody else on Twitter, got some group chats, made some friends, whatever. Reed and I always would interact and stay in touch, but then we talked about it on. So Reed had me on his podcast, David Fite had me on his podcast, and then we kind of floated the idea where we're like, man, we're not going to accomplish shit if all we do is infight. So. Dave posted something, Dave Smith posted something, and I was in the comments. And at this point, dude, I was so critical of Dave for how he handled Joe in 2020. I was like, man, this is a bad look. I thought all the Mises people were kind of really edgelords and just, kind of just hard to deal with, man. I'm a nice guy. I'm always feel like my grandmother from Alabama is over my shoulder. So I get in there with Dave and I'm like, hey, man, if you do this takeover, are you going to consider people like Justin Amash and Spike Cohen to be your allies, or are they going to be enemies in your eyes? And Dave says that's the moment where he was like, holy shit, people believe that like I'm against them. Absolutely not. And so he DM'd me and Reed and David and was like, hey guys, I thanks for engaging in this conversation. I'm sorry about the Archies of the world and all that. He's like, I want to keep this open dialogue and really focus on the greater liberty movement being not turned off by the Mises Caucus and us. And through that, we had the opportunity to get to know Dave. And he's basically made me a person from that point. He and Reed and just recently, Brian Nichols has gotten in touch with me, and we have a recurring thing on his show about sales, because that's what I've done for 13 years. And how to sell the message of liberty, and that's who I am. And just announced recently, like an hour ago, I'm going to try to get on that board next to Josh Smith and straighten some of this bullshit out in 2022, man.
Cool. I meant to preface this in the intro, but I completely forgot. I just want to say, anyone who knows me knows that, and knows Jeremy Todd, knows that we probably have different thoughts when it comes to messaging and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So if this is one of those things, I don't know if I'm going to feel, I mean, I haven't decided whether I want to be, not that I would necessarily be combative, but or argumentative. I may just let you lay out your points and not really give you pushback. But don't take that as me. So anyone listening, don't take that me as being agreeing. I'm just like letting him hear out. I may push back. I don't know. I don't know how I feel yet. I'm kind of tired. I'm not quite sure if I really want to. If anything, I might just lay out. We'll see. I mean, and also if it's like you might have a good point, I'm like, okay, and we move on. Like
if you do, I'm fine with that. So let me for everybody to understand kind of where I'm coming from and how I'm evolving a little bit. I think learning how to communicate with strangers on the internet is a skill that we are all kind of piss poor at, but we're getting a little better at as we go, or at least I'm trying to. And so one of the things I'm learning is that I don't necessarily need to be critical of everybody's message if it's different from mine. And that's something that, I feel free anybody to hold me accountable to. Here's where I'm at. We're all kind of on this liberty boat together, whether you believe in political resolutions, whether you believe in anarchist resolutions, whether you believe in it, but we are all kind of in this team together. And that's what the unity thing that I was about was. Let me be clear. There's some unity stuff out there that's like, let's bond with communists. No, that was not at all what Reed and I were ever trying to do. What we didn't want is what's happening.
I'm about it depending on what type of commie we're talking about.
Yeah.
I get what you mean.
You know what I mean? Like what we were trying to prevent is New Hampshire. Okay. Like we were trying to prevent people not communicating and just pulling backdoor shit to kind of rip us apart. So this was our focus was always Libertarian Party. So here's why that's our focus. For me, and I understand everybody's got different lanes, but for me, being in sales, my skill set is talking to the public, just having one-on-one conversations with strangers and changing hearts and minds. And the Libertarian Party is nothing more than a tool to do that for me. We're all going in the same direction, and we may be in different lanes. So, like, if somebody doesn't necessarily believe in the Libertarian Party, like for instance, you believe more, I guess, in agorism and anarchy kind of solution that doesn't involve government at all. I'm not gonna lie to you, there isn't a thing I want the government to do. So if that makes me an anarchist, fine. But you know what I have not been effective at is trying to convince people that the government shouldn't exist, because then they throw stupid ass straw men at me like, oh, the roads. And we spend an hour talking about stupid shit. And so what my job is, and what I've made my job and role in this whole movement, my lane is going to be, I'm that guy in the bathroom trying to slip you your first dose at 2 a.m, right? Like that guy who gives you that first taste of liberty, gets you to look at things a little bit different. The normies, by the way. My audience isn't anarchists. My audience isn't agorists. My audience isn't libertarians. I am trying to talk to people who have a mindset of, I'm going to listen to the debates, and if I like this guy better than this guy, I'm going to vote for him and hope things are the best. That's who I want. And I'm going to try and slip them a little dose and get them hooked, because what's the difference between because if I can get them to be libertarian, what's the difference between a libertarian and an anarchist?
Yeah.
6 months. 6 months.
Exactly.
Right. So all I got to do is get them on the road. And so that's my lane. That's where I'm at. And that's how I try to message, and what I feel like the party messaging should be too. Yeah. We are that first dose.
Yeah. And I get that. I think it depends on what you're doing. Like, for example, I knew you said like one-on-one, and I do think depending how you're interacting is entirely different, because how I interact on Twitter is a miles different than how I'm going to interact with a person on an individual basis. Absolutely. Because especially something like Twitter, even then, depending on what social media we're using, I'm going to interact differently. On Facebook, I might have a long fucking drawn out debate. If it's fucking Twitter, if you try to have a long drawn out debate with me, and I mean, if you're being nice, I probably won't do this. But if you're getting pissy with me, I'm probably just going to call you a faggot and move on. Like, I don't have the time to argue on Twitter, because Twitter is laid out to be a hassle to argue. Yeah. Like, and it's not a place where you can have constructive talks. Facebook used to be that way back in the day before they got super censored. But like, I used to do that like big time. I'd have long drawn out discussions. But depending on what social media you're using, depending on you're doing one-on-one, you also got to keep in mind social media. You are never, like almost never ever. I mean, maybe there are certain social medias on like sites I can't think of off the top of my head, but you're almost never actually really a one-on-one. There's always an audience somewhere. Yeah. So you also got to think like there's an audience. Like this is a spectacle. So sometimes when I'm doing shit online, like causing problems on Twitter, it's not really because I'm trying to convert the person I'm talking to. I mean, most of the time, like they are the least of my concerns. It's the audience. So, I mean, there's something to that. I did want to back up though, because I kind of wanted to lay down. I know you said like Minarchy Anarchy. It kind of sounds like you. Correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like you kind of don't really necessarily know where you are. You're kind of that. I mean, I've heard people say before that like mean, are you willing to call yourself an anarchist? I mean, if not, I mean, I don't really care either way. Okay.
I'm willing to call myself an anarchist.
Okay.
I fully believe that the government should be abolished, and there are steps in that. What I don't find productive is calling myself an anarchist to a normie, and then we have to talk about seatbelt laws for an hour. You know what I mean? When I'm more likely to get them to move a little bit if I talk about war, the war on drugs, police oppression, all that other sort of shit that kind of lines up and is a little bit easier to win because they don't get stuck in these dumbass straw men that they've been trained to believe their entire life.
Actually, I kind of slowly agreed a little bit there, but I actually think it's completely situational because I actually have found me personally, I generally just like, if someone asks me what I believe, I'll tell them. I don't shy away from it. But I have gotten more comfortable with being like, yeah, I'm an anarchist. But I feel like some of that's the delivery. Like, I know a lot of people get shocked, but if you act like it's a big deal, like if you either act ashamed or you act combative, I feel like that will sometimes. But if you just say it matter of factly, just very, that's what I am. A lot of times people will be like, what? And usually in that layout, it will give you an opening to be like, well, what do you mean? And then you can be like, yeah, well, I don't think this. I mean, obviously, you probably shouldn't immediately go into, well, I don't think we should have driver's licenses. Like, it's retarded. But like, it depends. I mean, depending on the person, it like all of this is tactics. Like, so I mean, I am of the opinion, like, I mean, sure, maybe don't. I wouldn't go around broadcasting your anarchist, but someone asks. Tell them. Yeah. I mean, or you can go libertarian. I mean, really, the labels are fluid. Like, I have like 10 different. I'm a libertarian. I'm a voluntarist. I'm an ANCAP. I'm an agorist. I'm an anarchist. Like, I could probably think of more. So it's like I'm able to be fluid, and all of them are accurate. It's just it's just depending on what connotation do I want to use, and that's how words work in general. So like, who am I talking to? Like, I'm not going to introduce myself as an agorist to a normie because that's like really specific nerdy libertarian. A lot even like a normie libertarian I probably won't. I'll probably tell them an ANCAP because if I say agorist, I've had people who are libertarians, self-professed libertarians, they go, what? Or you can tell they go, oh, okay, but you can see in their eyes, they're like, what the fuck is this talking about? So like, it is planned. But quick question, I'd be remiss to ask, do you hate the state?
I do hate the state. I hate everything the state does.
Now, what do you see the state as? Because I'm laying down these basic questions because I do think they all have implications on the other stuff. Because you can see where we're coming from in like messaging and stuff. I also have other questions, so we can kind of, because I think these are going to be cruxes of some of the messaging talk that we're going to have. Yeah. So what do you see the state as?
I believe the state falls somewhere on a spectrum. I think of. I like to answer questions as like at its best, at its worst. At its best, it is a naive tool of people who believe that they can organize society. At its worst, which is definitely more of what it actually is, it's a tool of the elites to maintain power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I normally describe it as, because I feel like it's almost, it really states a psychological phenomenon. It's the illusion of authority. So it's those that believe there are people who have the right to rule them, and vice versa, people who believe they have the right to rule others. So that's how I find it, because I find it constructive to point out that it's not even like, yes, I know like sometimes we will define it as an entity, but it's also a psychological phenomenon that like, if magically we were all able to just dispel the myth of authority, the state would disappear. Like,
I completely agree with that. One of the best arguments for anarchy, when people's like, what would a world with anarchy be? I'd be like, look around right now. Like right now, we exist in a state of anarchy until the state interferes. And how often does that happen? If it weren't for the state, could we not still be having brunch right now? Could we not still be drinking clean alcohol? Could we not still be in an air conditioned, space? So that's one of the examples I like to use, and that makes a lot of sense when you talk about it's a psychological state that really it's imaginary if it comes down to it, until you get your paycheck and realize, fuck, this isn't imaginary.
But I mean, it is. It's like, that's why I feel like it's important to point that out, because it is real and concrete in a sense, but it's also in another sense psychological. So when you're talking about like what we're talking about with combating it, whether it be with messaging or whatever, I feel like it's really important to define what you're fighting against, because it is like, we do look at it. You see your paycheck, you see the cop, you see the military, you see whatever, and you're like, this is a very physical thing, and you're like,
Mhm.
but really, it's also not. So if we're going to fight it, you have to understand what you're fighting. And I feel like that's when we get into a lot of issues where that's why some people are just like, well, if we could just, I don't know, if we could just reduce the military or be less bad, it kind of almost makes it revert to centrism if you don't define the enemy correctly. So, yeah.
No, I agree.
All right. Yeah. So next, I think, what do you like? What would be your path to success? And I don't mean like what, like, are you like voting to success? Are you hearts and minds? Are we talking like, are you going to think that we can vote people in and they're going to magically make things better? Or is this just a tool for outreach? I'm kind of leaving this open-ended for you.
Yeah, totally. So I think it's a noble goal to try, right? Like you can't tell me the world wouldn't be better tomorrow if Dave Smith was named president, right? Like it would be. It's a noble cause to attempt at this because they can then do the right things and we can trust these people. That's my belief. But that won't happen without winning hearts and minds. And in reality, none of our approaches will work if there's only 100,000 of us, right? Like so that's really like, if I were to put it at the top, like that's the mission, is we got to get more people to believe what we believe in order for our systems and our things that we want to happen to work, basically to end the state. Because if it's just 100,000 of us against 360 million, we're not long for the world, man.
Yeah. I would argue that actually a Dave Smith presidency would probably be one of the worst things that could happen. But Dave Smith is probably like who's brought me to anarchy, who's like, I guess, I feel like it's cringe. I guess he'd be like my biggest hero, if you will. I feel like it's a cringe term, but I mean, it's kind of he'd get JFK'd or he'd be fucking useless because we've seen how they did Trump. So like, if they
I mean, look, that's a fair argument to make, but Gary Johnson vetoed 600 bills. And so even if all a libertarian did was sit at that desk and fucking veto everything from Congress, we'd be in a better spot. You know?
Yeah, I mean, I'm arguing that, but I more want to hear where you're coming from for messaging, and I kind of want to tie that into messaging. And okay, so okay, I got it. It sounds like you're more focused on hearts and minds, but you're also so as long as I get the argument where you're coming from, as long as that's the focus, I think it's fine. I'm also think it's silly to think we're going to vote our way to success, although I can understand the idea that we will then get people in there and it'll be better in a sense or whatever. I mean, I have a not to go too deep in it, but I think it kind of is almost a corrupting influence in a sense. But whatever. Anyway, so now I kind of want to know like how you think the messaging should be carried out, and I'd like to hear examples, and especially we can use current events ones because this will be really apply. Like what's been done right and what's been done wrong. Because I know you've had issues specifically with LP and NH, but then I've heard before that you like how LPKY has been doing things, and I'm kind of like, I don't really get. For me, there's no substantive difference. They're both kind of just shit posting on actual legit libertarian issues.
That's a great point. And look, here's what I'll say. First, can you define for me your definition of shit posting, baby? Because I feel like that's useful too.
Yeah, I know. I was actually just thinking about this today because like we've given Dave a lot of shit about being against shit posting, and I myself included. But then also at the same time, I'm like, but how does Dave use shit posting? The way he almost uses shit posting defines it is, it's like my daughter when she'll be like call someone a jerk or something, and it's like, or say someone is rude, and it's like you just define that as whatever you don't like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's like I feel like whether it be we could criticize maybe Dave for doing the same thing, and then also us because there's no straight up term for. It's a very vague term what shit posting is. So like for me, like shit posting is just I don't even really know how do you I don't even know how to specifically define it. It's like
you know the meme that goes that's bait.
Yeah,
that's how I define shit posting. Is
that's
somebody
trolling?
Okay, well, all right.
I think trolling's a type of shit posting.
Okay, fair.
But at the same time, no one's wrong here because they're just ethereal internet terms that have no
How about the definition of outrage porn? Would you believe that shit posting is outrage porn? Just trying to piss some people off and then laugh at their outrage?
I mean, I could maybe say that's kind of it, and that actually might be the more specific one I'm looking for, because I'm actually, I was wanting to touch on unity division, but you already did a little bit. I'm actually, I've made it very clear, and I've actually been the thing I've talked to read about a lot is I think there's utility in division, and I think division and unity are two sides of the same coin. So like I'm kind of, it's almost like if, you know, I don't know, like you could split the herd and then fucking be like, well, we'll take this herd and we'll unite this. And you can, like, I feel like you gotta divide it along some place, and then you gotta, and my big thing is like, say with, because if you're going to define it as outrage porn, if that's what we're utilizing it, for me personally, I like it. That is kind of what I do on Twitter. Like, I fucking, oh shit, now I doesn't want to, but whatever, we'll get back to the minute. But I personally, like, I kind of do that a lot. Like I'm trying to think of a good example of one I've done recently where I will legit throw shit out there to get outrage. And then that way when it's like bait, and it's like when someone does it, I'm like, faggot. And like, I could be like, I could just make fun of them. And it's just my way to be like, get them to fuck off. And the way I've described this as is, in a sense, that's unity, because that takes people that are more in tune with my message and cement them more the way I want them to go. And takes the people, to some extent, it's separating the wheat from the chaff, which and can kind of takes the people who I think, because it's kind of the remnant concept of like, you know, I'm identifying the remnant and I'm kind of throwing away the rest. And not even necessarily throwing away. If they want to come back later, cool. But I don't, especially on something like Twitter, where we already talked about earlier, it's like, it's not the place for that kind of talk. Like, it's really, Twitter is kind of the perfect place for this quick, like, you know, who's on my team, who's not, you know, like, you know, you go this way, you go that way. And we're like kind of creating the divide. And then once we've created the divide, we can unify among on one side of the divide or the other. And I don't want to throw this off, because I do. It's fine. Me think of something I wanted to mention earlier. Like, where do you think things are going? And I'll tell you why I think this is important right now. I'll lead up with my take. I think we're going to see in the next 10 to maybe 30 years, we're going to see a bigger intellectual divide, physical divide. And we're going to see, and this is, I mean, I know you've said before you're not huge on theory, but like, say, for example, like, I don't know, Konkin, one of his big concepts was he like the NLM was how like the way the agorist revolution will work out is that we will have pockets of freedom that, like, even like right now, I mean, there's different phases that he's described it as, and those pockets will grow. And then as those pockets will grow, those like sections of statism will shrink into pockets. It's almost like they're like bubbles. And like, it kind of makes sense. I've had other readings that have kind of described the same thing. So I think that's where things are going. We're going to see more of a divide, where we're going to see, I think, an opening for freedom. But then on the other hand, there will be smaller bubbles of statism, but they will be almost more authoritarian. Because I think as those bubbles get smaller, and I think I might be wrong, but I think Konkin said something similar, that it was like they would get more authoritarian within those areas. Because I think as the state dies, it's going to recede to its power centers, which is going to be, I mean, we could debate where, I think the obvious one is rural and city. Like, I don't feel like there's any, I mean, we might be able to debate on red and blue, because red and blue can swap. Like, I mean, 8 years from now, the red and the blue can be different, which is more authoritarian. Personally, right now, I'm like, I think it's more the divides. Like, red is like where roughly there's kind of sort of more freedom-ish, but mostly rural and city. So, like, I think in the future, we're going to see, you know, the rural areas are going to have more freedom. And then we're going to have, you know, I don't know if you've been a fucking conspiracy guy and shit, but on like Agenda 2030 and shit, where they've talked about having like fucking these smart cities where they're like, to them, the way they explain it in the Agenda 2030 is like, oh, there's great fucking smart cities, and, you know, you'll have no property and you'll be great. They'll be fucking dope. And like for us being, we're like, whoa, what the fuck? And like, that's kind of like where I actually do see the future going, where we're going to have these like little, you know, smart cities or whatever you want to call them, or areas where it's going to be more fucking more authoritarianism, and then we're going to have areas on the outskirts that are more freedom. And so I'm, in my head, I'm kind of like, how do I want to go about this? And so for me, it's kind of like, I want to create that divide. And I think that divide opens up room for liberty, essentially. So as we further this divide, like to some extent, I have no problem if you want to go to an authoritarian area. I mean, I would like to be able to talk you out of it, but to some extent, I guess it's, well, in a sense, it's still, you're being coerced in a sense by state. I mean, I can only do so much. It's kind of like in religion. If I had a buddy who like was in a cult, I mean, at some point it's kind of like, well, I mean, I've tried talking you out of it. I don't know what to fucking tell you. So
yeah,
like
the problem is the cult is massive, and holds all the power. And so every strategy that I have is to shrink that cult and grow ours, basically, to grow, because the numbers are currently not on our side. And we have to be persuasive to get more people onto our side so that, like you said, we can grow those bubbles and pockets. Because the reality is that if the numbers stay skewed the way they are currently of people who want authoritarianism versus people who want liberty, they're going to crush us beneath the tracks of a tank. Like we are going to lose if we don't get more people on our side. It's short of some other, relocation or, we go take over Alaska or some shit, right? Like they're so that's sort of where do I think things are going. I don't think you're far off. I think we're starting to see it now at the state level. They're basically giving a big finger to the feds. They're saying you have no authority here. I think it all started with marijuana laws too in Colorado, where they were like, we don't give a shit that this is federally illegal. We run this state. And then I think I think at some point, secession is inevitable. I think I got to be to kind of clarify here. Like, I am not trying to unite with authoritarians. Like, there is absolutely a group that we are never going to change their hearts and minds. But if you go talk to your neighbor, if you go talk to somebody at the grocery store, man, they are just drones trying to get by. And that is who we have the opportunity to change the hearts and minds. So when this shit does go down, they pick our side, like you're talking about, where there's a divide. And so that's ultimately, I guess, my strategy and what I think is going to happen. What happens after the secession, we'll see, man. I don't know. But I don't think the United States as we know it is long for this world.
Yeah, I mean, I've been saying a lot too. I actually am not necessarily sure. I don't see it outside the scope of possibilities. There might even be areas that do and the areas that don't. I actually am not entirely sure that I see a secession on. I know that's one thing we've been talking a lot. I've been talking a lot about like soft secession or soft nullification, where it's, yes, there's not a formalized secession or a formalized nullification, but it might be one of those things where it's like, well, those people are on the outskirts and they're out in the country. Yeah, they're kind of part of this state this thing we call a state, but they kind of don't do what the fuck we tell them to do. So in essence, it's kind of like Jeff Deist always uses the analogy of the speed limit. Like, if the speed limit on the road says 70 miles an hour, but everyone drives 90 and no one gets pulled over until they drive 95, then in effect, the speed limit's 95. And so that's kind of how I see it, where you're going to have the areas where, to use a speed limit analogy, there's going to be areas where the speed limit's 50 and they'll pull you over for going 48. And those are going to be your authoritarian areas. Yeah. And then you're going to have spaces where it's like the speed limit's 50. And I mean, most people can do whatever the fuck they want. And every now and again, maybe they might pull someone over for going 30 over or some shit.
Right. But
use that analogy.
Yeah. But if we believe that these are elites in power, do you think they're going to secede that? I mean, like, I know there are ways to sort of weaken that influence, but at the end of the day, they got the tanks, man. Like, if they want it, what's stopping them? If we don't have the numbers, what's stopping them?
I actually think we do have the numbers, because the beauty of our system is that it's like, in a sense, it's individualist. Like, the beauty of anarchy is it's decentralized. Like, so like, this may not be anarchy per se, because it's, in a sense, it's a very, if anything, this is almost like a minarchist dream, in a sense, but like, in a way, although it's like, we just kind of have this state that's kind of there, but not, no one really gives a shit. I mean, I'm talking on my ass. This may not be how it goes, but in this scenario, I see, like, because all people are like, oh, we'll get crushed by the state. I'm like, I mean, will you? I mean, will we? I mean, sure, if we do, because everyone uses like Waco, or they use like the fucking was it Bundy or I forget who the fuck, the dude who's lived in the woods. They always use those as examples, and it's like, well, yeah, because that's fucking retarded. Like if you're like we are the group, and we're here in the centralized location. Fuck you, feds. Like, yeah, probably not going to work out for you too well. But if you're just a loose organization of people just going about their life, and you don't have any centralized leader or whatever the fuck, like, what are they going to do? And that's kind of what I'm getting at. Like, with this future, I see the power being more centralized. And then on the outskirts, it's kind of be the spot where they don't have as much power. And naturally, it's just going to kind of be like that. Like, it'll be, what are they going to do? I mean, there's no groups. Yeah, I mean, maybe they could fucking do some shit, but they're going to be more focused on, actually laying claim to power where they actually have an ability to. Because I think that's one of the things, the state, we give it credit as being super powerful, but it's nowhere near as powerful as we think it is, at all.
No, and I'll sit here and say that, and then I'm like, well, if they tried to take the guns, they're all gonna fucking die. Like, there's too many of them. Like, so I'm talking out my ass too. By the way, just a plug. We were talking about this the other day. Dude, if somebody explained theory to me the way you are explaining theory right now, I would be into theory. Like, I cannot read these old fucking German white dudes. Like, it ain't in my attention span. Well, there you go. Whatever. I can't. It's like reading the King James version, man. Like, I just can't. All right. So what you're saying is more of a loose, under the radar type of organization that basically just ignores the fact that the government and the state exist. I can see that. Do you ever get the comparison, and this is a bad one and not a perfect one, but do you ever get the comparison of like the Taliban versus the Afghan government in Afghanistan? The Taliban is really out in the rural areas. They have they have the villages and all that sort of stuff. And so it's more of a religious governing body. It's not official. And basically the Afghan army has no authority outside of Kabul and the major cities.
No, I don't think I've heard that one, but I think that works pretty well. I mean, it sounds pretty good to me just off the top. I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously it's like, I'm not saying it would be this.
Yeah, no, it would not be the
Taliban. I mean, the frequent one I typically use is there's this book by James C. Scott and called Against the Grain. It was about the history of the governments and like how they came about, and kind of goes into like anarchy and shit. And I make the case that it's like this is kind of like history repeating itself. Like, this is like what I see on the horizon is history repeating itself, because the advent of the initial states, according to him, he's an historian, the advent of the original states was around agriculture, because there became these fertile areas that became prosperous, and then the state, kind of like a parasite, attached itself to those prosperous areas. And then there ended up being people who lived outside the agricultural areas who were like your barbarians, your tribes, your whatever the fuck you want to call them. They have all sorts of terms throughout the centuries, most of which have negative connotations. And those were actually like people who were just living the old way or whatever, whether it be, foraging, hunting, whatever. They weren't just living off the land in this monoculture, agriculture type way. Like, and he showed, like, he made the case in the book that they actually had healthier, better lives because they had a better diet. They actually end up being more prosperous because they weren't under this, like, centralized state, like just a whole bunch of different reasons. And I see that kind of being the same thing. And like, history tells the tales of states, so we don't really hear much about this and how these guys were actually straight up fucking killing it. They were doing awesome. But then you end up having these like centralized locations where the state stayed at. And the state didn't really ever fuck with the barbarians, except for when maybe they were cause issues, or if, say, they were trying to do some expansive land grabs or whatever. But for the most part, those people chilled on the outside, lived in harmony, occasionally would work together to push off the state. The state was being shitty, like, and encroaching on their territory. But most part, they just chilled. And obviously, this isn't perfect anarchy, and that's kind of why I think it's a good example. Because, when you're talking about tribal societies, obviously they probably have some sort of something akin to government or whatever the fuck you want to call it. So, but much better than what it was in the centralized area. So that's why I like to use that as an example. I think it's the same thing, like, but with different technology, essentially.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Here's what I'll say about anarchists and agorists. Like, I think you're right. I don't disagree. What I'm doing is trying to go down swinging, and because I still hold the fear that is not going to be peaceful, and so that's why I'm gonna look. I'm probably gonna lose, but we're gonna give it hell and see if we can make this a little more peaceful. Hold it off a little longer. Because like you said, with technology, with the state where it's at, man, I fear that sort of thing won't happen without violence, knowing the state. And so I'm going to try.
Yeah,
I'm gonna try.
Well, part of the beauty of like agorism and stuff, and I'm not even necessarily trying to convert you or anything, is that it's essentially anarchy in action. And so, like, even if you do want to be involved in politics or whatever, like, I would definitely always suggest. I mean, I have my reasons why I think you probably shouldn't, but I mean, if you're going to, whatever. I mean, fucking do you? I don't give a shit. But like, fucking, I would suggest doing something. And like I've said before, that it's a mindset. It's more of a, it's more about like breaking the law and not giving a shit. And I don't mean like doing bad things. And I also don't mean being an idiot.
People under the table.
Yeah, like, and I also don't mean being an idiot and getting caught, because a lot of people be like, well, I'm going to end up like Ross Ulbricht. I'm like, well, maybe don't do Silk Road. No one says you have to go do the max. Right. Like, do what you can handle. For some people, it's as simple as a garden, or whatever, like, or having
crypto.
Livestock, crypto, because that was actually kind of what I was getting at too. Like crypto, things like crypto and 3D printing, like those actually like are like, you were talking about how like we might need violence, but it's like this is a way to get normies to adopt our shit without even having to convince them of theory at all. Yeah, like it's like, this is just, hey, here you go, and here's this alternate fucking currency. And yes, I know people are saying that government's already getting their dirty dick beaters in there, and they are, but it opens another avenue. So it's another spot that, like, the more we can rush people into those markets that have similar thinking as us, the easier we can take it over. And we are more efficient in the state. Like someone was talking today, and I've heard this before. The beauty, actually, it was the Malice fucking interview with Jordan Peterson I was listening to, and they were talking about how, like, anytime you have coercion in a system, it is immediately going to be less effective. Because you have to utilize energy to coerce, essentially. Whereas in a voluntary fucking one, it's more effective. And it's also it's decentralized, so it's like way harder to combat. So I mean, in a sense, I think the long arm of history will turn towards us. So yeah.
So I have a question for you. Do you believe persuasion is a form of coercion? Okay.
No, it's dumb.
All right. It's just there's I have been blocked by a few people that are in the institute that is in Auburn, Alabama, because I tried to clearly explain to them that there is a difference between shouldn't and can't, and that difference is persuasion. And they were like, "Don't tell me what to do. That's authoritarian." I'm like, it's really not. I'm just making a suggestion. So okay. All right, cool. That's good.
Okay. Shit. So anyways, let's tie this back to kind of going on a fun little tangent there. Yeah. And let's tie it into like current events, because like, where have you thought messaging has gone well? Like, provide an example of where you thought messaging has gone well. That, like, because we were trying to like quibbling over like what shitposting is. BKY. Like,
so for me, okay, so this is, I want to be crystal clear on this. There's not a thing that an LP account has posted that I disagree with. It's libertarian shit. What matters to me, especially coming from those accounts, if our job is to persuade normies, there's a way to do that. And that wasn't an effective technique, in my opinion, being in sales for 13 years, teaching people who've never sold before how to sell things and be persuasive. It was bad technique for me about New Hampshire. And it was really specifically the one where it opens with in child labor laws. That's poor technique. Because here's what, and I think Kentucky does a really great job, and I can explain why. But the one where they went off the rails is kind of the one that got traction, and I don't think that one was even that bad. The Jewish Star one. But what happens is we have to keep our goal in mind, and that goal is changing hearts and minds, in my opinion, persuading normies. And after the Jewish Star one, were we talking about vaccine passports? No. What were we doing? We had a 3-day fight over what's anti-Semitism and what isn't. And so I don't like posts where we leave that room to be misinterpreted and then change the topic. Because on that same day, Dave Smith's got 50,000 likes talking about the vaccine passports. Justin Amash has something similar. They're really what was trending on Twitter. and LP Kentucky is the one getting the attention, but we're talking about anti-Semitism. I don't want to talk about anti-Semitism. I want to talk about vaccine passports and how it's an encroachment on your rights, and we should absolutely fight it in any way possible. So that's where I'm at. Is it there is a technique to delivering these things in a persuasive manner, and I think New Hampshire's post, if that was their intent, it fell short. I don't think people walked away from that initial post going, they got a point, if they didn't already believe that.
Yeah, well, I guess that's kind of what I've been getting at with increasing the divide, and I don't know if I necessarily entirely agree with the point is to get normies. And
Okay.
don't get me wrong, I mean, I think that's a great side effect, and I think bold messaging to some extent has the effect of naturally attracting it, but it's also to galvanize your team. So at least in my eyes, that's kind of what I wanted to set the backdrop of how I think things are going to go, what our latent beliefs are to begin with, so on and so forth. Because while I do want to bring in normies, I guess that's not necessarily my prime objective. And then also on top of that, I think it's also a matter of what you're in. That's why I brought up social media before, what you're interacting with. I think with something with Twitter, there's a reason why the LPNH tweet about child labor hit 12 million engagements. And you can say it offended people, but you know what? 12 million people saw it. And I know you brought up oh, well, now we're talking about anti-Semitism or kids in mines or whatever the fuck. Right. But I've been saying for a while, you need to just Chad meme yes and move on. Because say, for example, the anti-Semitism, that's a good example. Anytime you say something that, say something like that, and somebody oh, well, you're racist. I've been actually a big advocate of later, just go, yes, I am. Now what? Would you like to talk? Because, I mean, you can throw around these fucking, because I feel like anyone instinctually knows that, to some extent, they're being somewhat dishonest. And once again, social media is it's not a one-on-one. Sure, in a one-on-one argument on, face-to-face, if someone accused me of being racist, I'm probably not going to go, yeah, I am. Now what? I'm probably just, I don't get me wrong. That probably is the end of the discussion. But, I'm not going to be yes, I am a racist. Let's keep talking. I'm just probably going to be all right, well, fuck you and leave. But, so obviously that's not a tactic. But, on something like social media, I actually think that is a legit way. Because that is all right, now what? Now, okay, cool. Sure, you can think that. Now, would you like to have a talk? And there's something to, with the child labor thing. Me and you both agree with it. There's a root of truth there, and it is bringing in eyes. And if they're so, I don't know. I actually think a lot was done with it. I also talked to Kaufman and to get a rough idea of his how the numbers for the party went, and they've been up 25% since then, which is way higher than normal. So, I mean, while I obviously have my drawbacks with utilizing the political parties, but I mean, it's kind of if that's your goal. So there the fuck you go.
all right. So let me. There's a lot of things I want to touch on that you just brought up. So number one, I am ignoring everyone that's offended by this and outraged. That's not who I'm talking about. I have no interest in that. If I've got a tweet to make a pitch, I want that pitch to be solid, and I'm not trying to bring in normies. I'm trying to radicalize normies. I want them to change the way they think. I'm not looking to get people through coalitions to vote for the Libertarian Party because we softened our message to appeal to them. No, I want them to believe our message. I'm trying to change their belief system. So these people that get offended and call you I do not care. That's not at all what I'm talking about. When I say anti-Semitism, what I mean is that we left them the room in that analogy to change the subject, which is absolutely what our opposition, which is what those people are going to do. And so if we're going to craft a message that we know is going to be controversial, leave no room for your opposition to change the subject, I guess. And they're going to try, but oftentimes that if they resort to being racist or whatever, that's fine. Now, the party. We are, when Kaufman talks about that growth in New Hampshire, the last 11 years at least, there has been a disassociation, a disconnect between libertarians and the Libertarian Party. That's easy to see, right? It's why so many anarchists don't believe in it. It's why we get the party itself gets trolled all the time by libertarians. That it's because the party didn't and doesn't stand for what libertarians stand for. Now, so that 25% growth was the people who already agree with us. We didn't change hearts and minds with that post. That wasn't somebody who was like, I used to think child labor laws were just evil, and now I think they're great. Or I used to think child labor laws were great, and now I think they're evil. Like that. This was people who were just excited to see us saying something, and that's what you're talking about, is galvanizing your team. And the Libertarian Party is in a place where that needs to be done. So I won't fight you on that. I won't disagree with that at all. And the first step in making this party something that's worth a shit, that can change this world in any way, is we got to get libertarians to vote for Libertarian Party candidates. And if we can't do that, then we failed. Then we can move on to the normies. So I want to frame it in that way, and I understand. When I talk about the posts, when you're in sales, if they had simply they put out like 3 posts or so in that thread about ending child labor.
Yeah, something like
that. If they had instead simply flipped the order of the words, and what I mean by that is instead of saying end child labor laws and then leaving it up to the audience to go, these crazy motherfuckers want 4-year-olds in coal mines. Instead, you say, it is insane that my 14-year-old niece could go to jail for running a lemonade stand. According to the books, if a police officer wanted to, he could put her in handcuffs and put her in jail for running a lemonade stand. Is that not insane? That's why we need to end child labor laws. So the process of sales is creating a problem and then providing a solution. Even if that solution is bold and radical, scary, ugly, you got to create a need and then a value up front. And so that's why I have no problem with what they said. I agree with it. If they had simply changed the order to talk about the problem that they want to solve, we could have saved ourselves a lot of the trouble of having to explain, no, we don't want to put your toddler in a fucking coal mine. That is not what we're talking about here. We want the 15-year-old kid who can make some extra money by working on his dad's landscaping company instead of going around door to door with his own thing. Like, put him on the damn payroll. It's not that hard. Like, that's what we're advocating for. You can eliminate all of it. They're called objections, basically. It's bullshit that people can throw at you and say, oh, well, you must mean this. If you can eliminate those objections in advance with just a few words, I'm an advocate of doing that.
I guess it just I actually saw a couple people that following it tried to do similar posts to what you said, and no one gave a fuck. That's the problem. Yeah. No one cares when you say shit like that. When you go, well, I think we should let kids finish high school early. That way they can do apprenticeships or whatever. No one gives a shit if you say that. Like, to some extent, I think there is utility in outrage porn. And I don't know. Like, I mean, I'm not a sales guy, so I don't know. But I think maybe there's something to do with modern day shit. Also, what social media you're using. With something like Twitter, like, there is something to the outrage porn. That is what draws eyes. And, like, yes, there will be the objections. But the great thing about fucking Twitter is you can ignore them. And I actually think there's utility in ignoring the objections, responding to the people that you feel like you can respond to get your message out. Because you let your haters fucking draw people to you, ignore or even ridicule your haters depending on the situation. Usually, especially in a situation like this, I would advocate for ignore and then respond to the people who seem to have actual legit like interest in it. Because I mean, to some extent, I think someone who's going to respond freaking the fuck out is either so goddamn stupid, I don't really have an interest in like really interacting with them. Because I mean, I don't really feel like maybe they can through osmosis maybe come more this way, but like you're not going to get anything out of someone who's already incensed. But you might be able to fucking pick people out through that group of outrage or people who actually have legitimate questions and address those. So like, I don't know. I guess it's kind of like why not both.
Yeah, well, you got a chicken and an egg issue, right? Is that one of the problems is that you've got to get those eyes, and to get those eyes, you need your haters to kind of share and do all this other stuff. The problem with that one post is that, in my opinion, if I'm an eye scrolling past it, I walk away and go, they didn't change my mind. Like they didn't make a case in the original tweet that got all the eyes. They didn't make a case there to that would convince somebody, a normie, to change their stance on child labor laws. Like, yeah, they got the eyes, but how did those eyes respond? How did those eyes feel? What did those eyes think when they saw it? Was it positive? Was it negative? And I'm not talking about the people responding. I'm not talking about the bitches and the haters that are in there like crying about bullshit. That's not what I'm talking. I'm talking about the other 13 million that saw it and walked away. Didn't ask questions, didn't engage. Did we do the things necessary to persuade them? Now, you make a good point. Does the outrage porn, is the outrage porn the only way to get the eyes? It's possible. I can't argue with the fact that it got the eyes. The numbers are there. The data stands out. I'd like to see some attempts, because there's this false kind of choice that happens where we've only tested two options, Jose. We've tested this sort of like, don't give a fuck, I'm gonna piss people off and go for it. And then there's this really just sort of like soft, milky, like, oh, we want to be everybody's. There is a way to draw the middle, and that's I think people who are great at that, Spike, Dave, Ron Paul, no, they were able to craft really good arguments and get eyes. Now I know we're not Ron, Dave, and Spike, right? Like, but if it's in our circle and we all can convert one or two or three, man, I don't know. I would love to see, and this is what I think LP Kentucky has done well. And I wanted to bring up one of their tweets. Hold up. It was a less controversial topic, which I think has a lot to do with it, by the way. You talk about important things and it doesn't get traction. You talk about stupid shit and it gets traction.
I do want to real quick,
please,
to let you.
While I'm searching.
I do think there is some, like, I want to say, I will concede with you a little bit that I don't think it's one extreme or the other. And I do agree that there is definitely utility. I think there is usefulness in being provocative to draw on the eyes, but then there is also usefulness in having something constructed to provide as well. So like, say, like, maybe a great fucking like in between would be like, if say that had been a thread and the second thread of a second tweet in that thread had actually then expanded, because to be honest, I don't even remember the whole LPNH tweet, but just to, hypothetical, if that had been a provocative first tweet and then the second follow up of the thread was something that was more like, hey, this, like, that way you have that, like, oh my God, to draw people in, and then you go on. But anyways, I think there is a balance, and I think there is a problem that us libertarians fucking have, because we're so caught up in theory, in principle, in whatever, that we're so goddamn binary. And the funny thing is, we accuse the other people, like the other ones, of being like the duopoly or what the fuck, or being smooth brains. But sometimes we're some of the biggest smooth brains, some of the most binary thinkers, because we are so set in principle. And there are certain things that there aren't just magical principles. And when it comes to tactics, I think that's one of them. When it comes to tactics, it's a subtlety. There's nuance. So it's almost like a dance. Like, so it's not as simple as just like, this is this, and that's that. And this is what you gotta do. So like, same thing goes with like stuff like tactics. I know a lot of people, like, say from my end, like agorists, try to be like, say shit like, well, this breaks NAP by voting. And I actually come from a tactical perspective, if we went into that like discussion. So I don't take that. I think, so I also concede that I could be wrong, because when we're having a discussion of tactics, it's more open. There's not an exact science. And the same thing with dealing with people. I think it's not an exact science. So I think that's why it's not one or the other. There is definitely an in-between. I would think that maybe you're probably not as hardcore as I would like a message to be. If anything, I actually, like, I know Dave Smith's against shit posting for official accounts. I want more shit posting for official accounts. But I agree that you have a point. Like, I will give you that.
It's fair. Yeah, and I'm in the same boat too. So I feel that. So here's the Libertarian Party of Kentucky one, and tell me if you like would consider this bold. It says, how do you take down big tech and big pharma? Repeal all IP laws. You'll see insulin sold in Happy Meals. That is pretty fucking bold. I think, but they led with the problem, right? And somebody coming across that, they have nothing left to interpret on their own. Like, they made the point really clear. And so that's kind of what I'm hoping for. That's what I'd like to see us do more of. And you hit on a good point. Is it Tom Woods that says attack the right from the right and the left from the left? We are the most radical motherfuckers on every position. We are 100%. There is no 80-90% on war, right? We are 100% against it. There is no 80-90% on legalized drugs. We are 100% for legalizing drugs. And people don't work that way. Like, and so what you mentioned when you talk about it being a dance and being nuanced and meeting people where they are and kind of feeling and understanding what they feel. And I am all for alpha beta testing. What I fear, and I think what most people who are in opposition to this fear, is that by one doing an alpha test, if it goes really poorly, it reflects on everybody. And then their beta test is now skewed by those results. But it is what it is. I will say, I think I would presume that IP tweet came shortly after the heels of the Jewish Star one. So to play back to my other point, because I don't know what traction that one got, but I bet you it was riding a lot off the wave of the other one. But I will grant you that is a better. But that's why it's like this is subtlety of like how you play off each other. Because you could say with LPNH, like say with that child labor law one, like, and you may agree with that, disagree with that specific tweet, but what's their follow-up tweet going to be? Maybe, and you know what? Because now they have eyes on them. Like, what are they going to do next? So it's just, that's when we come to tactics. And you did bring up a good point with like the war, and like there is a place for principles. There's a place for yes and no, right and wrong, and there's a place for. This is like, and that's kind of what I was getting at when it comes to like tactics, whether it be messaging, whether we utilize the Republican Party, the Democrat Party, the Libertarian Party, no party, like it's tactics. And I think that to some extent, I think this is something that we just as libertarians need to accept more. There are far more realms that are subjective than there are objective, and we are so stuck in the objective realm. That it's just not even fucking funny. It's actually kind of annoying how set we are in objective ways, and not everything is just simple zeros and ones. So, it's a major mindset shift. And then once they make that mindset shift, and this may be part of the reason I stay out of the theory also, is because I want to be the voice from the other side. Like, I want people in our movement to read the Rothbard, read the Mises, read the authors you were talking about. I don't know them all. Read their theory, know your principles, learn what this is about. But then you got to be able to apply it in convincing other people. You got to be able to do something with it. It's not, knowledge is not power unless you do something with it. And so how about we pick up How to Win Friends and Influence People? How about we pick up Spin Selling, right? Like, just pick up a book that's going to make you a better human at interacting with others, so that you can get more people to believe your ideas too. And that brings me to a perspective on what we're talking about here in tactics. In psychology, and this can be our segue into the Overton window. In psychology, they call it compliance. I don't really like the idea of compliance. It's really the term compliance. It's more about persuasion, but they say there's two forms to gain persuasion in psychology. There's something called foot in the door and door in the face. So foot in the door is where it's all the scenario of like, if I'm a door-to-door salesperson, I walk up to your door and I've got to get your buy-in on something. A foot in the door is where I make a small offer and I'm like, hey, can I get you to buy this $1 product? And then I upsell you from there, right? Until you make me stop. That's one tactic. The other tactic is called door in the face, which is where I start at like $10,000 and you go, fuck no, fuck you. That's not going to work. And then I'm like, okay, how about 9, right? And that backs down. For me, what LPNH was trying to do was a lot more the door in the face tactic. And that traces back to the Overton window. And let me tell you, that shit works. But it works a lot better when there's money involved and when there's a price and when you can negotiate your way down. You can't do that with principles. You can't negotiate down principles with people. Also, one of the problems with door in the face is the way our biology is set up. We talk about triggering people, right? What triggering actually is there's different parts of your brain, and the one at the back, our most primitive, is called the cerebellum. It's what makes your heart beat. It's what makes your lungs breathe. It's what, makes your eyes blink. And it also keeps you from being eaten by a tiger in the wild, right? It's your fight or flight response. Your theory, your logic is all up here, but you've got very limited resources. So like when you look like a guy who's been in a scuffle or two like me. You ever been in a fight and tried to talk or like say something afterwards and you're like, blah, 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 like it's because all of your brain's resources have been channeled to that back part that is like, stay alive, land this punch. If you don't, this person's going to fucking eat you, right? Like that's the way our brains work. And then it takes a minute before we can actually calm the fuck down and use our rational part of our brain. And that's why like dudes get in a fight and then 5 minutes later, they're like, I'm sorry, bro. I love you, man. Like it's because when we're back here, we're stupid. When we're up here, we're smart. When you trigger people, they go back here. They get stupid. They react, right? And so you have a hard time crafting a logical, rational argument if you set off that response. And that's all I'm trying to avoid momentarily. But you make a great point. Like if I do that to enough people, this shit catches fire and more people are going to see it. So there is some take and go with that. Now, the problem with the Overton window is that it is based off of that door in the face method. It basically says this part here in the middle, this middle part is acceptable. But if I talk about shit that's wild over here, what it does is it makes something 1 or 2 ticks in that direction seem more normal, right? So like if I say end all child labor laws, all of a sudden it seems more normal that a 17-year-old get a job unquestioned, right? And that's the whole idea of moving the Overton window. Here's the problem, is that we have lost that middle. And I think Dave talks about this on his show sometimes, is that the middle has stood for printing trillions of dollars, endless wars, like the police state growing and growing, murdering people in the streets. Like we have lost that middle. And so what's happening is you're seeing that Overton window has broken. And now the actual acceptable conversations are way the fuck over here and way the fuck over here. And so like in physics, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So now if we say some wild shit over here, it doesn't shift a window closer to us. What does it do? It inspires the other side to say some even more wild, ridiculous shit. And there's all these normal people in the middle who are looking at both of these groups like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I hate both of you crazy bastards, right? And so that's why I'm like, okay, maybe the approach is we take this really wild, radical position and we present it a little more like we bring the temperature, the tone, whatever down a little bit, and maybe we can kind of bring some people back to a little bit of a normal conversation, because all we're doing right now is swinging wildly in a pendulum in response. Every problem, and this is my opinion, every fucking thing that Joe Biden does during this term is Donald Trump's fucking fault, right? If we had somebody like who was it? Coolidge, who goes in there, doesn't do jack shit for 4 years, right? That his opponents aren't responding in kind. And I don't know what that political philosophy is called, but like everybody's got to calm the fuck down a little bit in order for this Overton window shit to make any sense anymore, because all we're doing right now is getting more and more radical, and that shit is becoming normal. And the problem is they're both fucking status and we're losing. So whatever strategy we got to implode to get out of that. That's why I don't like the Overton window analogy, man. I think that shit is far gone.
That's funny. Like I was thinking about this because I knew you had talked about the Overton window, and I actually was like, what is he getting at with this? And I kind of like, did my thoughts, kind of like while I'm sitting there taking a dump, kind of, pondering type shit. And like, I actually ironically came to the same conclusion as like what you were saying. But the funny thing is, I actually had the opposite interpretation of I like that shit. Like, like I get what you're saying that maybe more what you were getting at was the left and right divide, whereas I'm getting at the authoritarian libertarian divide. And I am all for expanding that. Like, I want to, like, I guess maybe that's kind of where I'm getting with more like division. Like, fine, sure, whatever. This splits into 2 windows. I don't give a fuck. Like, sure, whatever. If this centrist fucking like milquetoast fucking, well, I'm kind of sort of for, freedom, but like, I don't know, we can't completely like, no, I fuck that shit. Like, pick a side. I don't give a fuck. Like, I want to get to a point where it's like, fucking, where are you at? Like, do you want freedom? Do you want to be a slave? Like, pick your side. I don't give a shit. Like I'm all for pushing that shit. And like, I get where you're getting. Maybe we were looking at different axes.
Yeah, we were.
So,
I was talking about it a little different. Yeah. I would like to bring us to the center on the left-right divide a little bit. But
I guess I'm more like ignore that shit because I don't give a fuck about the culture thing. I try to spell that because people will bring that up and I'll be like, you know what? In a free country, you know what? You gotta fucking, it'll be magical and it'll fucking have a free market of culture. So you know what?
I believe that as well. One of the things that Dave said that opened my eyes is like, no, we have to be in this left right shit because we're the only ones who can get them to do a truce. Like we, as much as we'd like to ignore it, we are kind of caught in the middle of this because we believe what you just said. Like in a free country, you can do whatever. Let Portland be whatever the fuck Portland. They can have furry festivals and all that. Nobody gives a shit about Portland, right? Like let Miami be what Miami is. Let El Paso be what El Paso is. Like let people fucking get in your car and move if you don't like your city. Like it's not that hard. And you can solve your culture by fucking relocating. The biscuits out here suck. So guess what the fuck I'm doing? I'm moving back to the South, motherfucker. Like I don't like Arizona that much. I can't get a good biscuit. And I'm moving. Not just on that. We got to get this kid closer to the grandparents, man. But but that's kind of the point. Now, what I will say is that there are those people that you're talking about that are kind of stuck in the middle. Who was it that originally, like, where were you before your enlightenment, I guess? What how did you fall?
You have to clarify. I had multiple enlightenments, and then also too, like, I guess I don't even get.
When was the last time you were a statist? And then what happened? What changed?
What changed between? Well, I guess for me, like, I would have to say the last time I was a statist was when I was a minarchist, because, like, for me personally, the transition from statist to minarchist was a slow progression, and there was never a clear, concise "I'm no longer this." It was I was kind of in centrist land where I sort of slowly, and then for me, the fucking, like, I had to jump the fucking valley. Or jump the fucking gulf, or where the fuck, like I did hop over the fence, was anarchism. That was for me. And then then I had another one where, like, I guess it's more of like an epiphany. I had other ones. That was the biggest one for me.
So what was it that moved you through that sort of spectrum from statist to minarchist? Like, what set you on that path?
I mean, mostly it was just kind of being intellectually curious, exploring different things. And it's like, I think I actually talked to you kind of like we had talked before about, like, getting into theory and like how you go about it. And I equated it to like working out. It's kind of like you just kind of start doing it. That's kind of how it was for me with that. Like, I just kind of started listening to podcasts. So it's just, got more curious, like, oh, well, what does this guy say? What's that guy say? And then, like, and from there I expanded. And it's kind of the same thing working out. Cause like, I wasn't always able to squat 600 pounds, but you know what? One day when I was like 13, I was like, I'm gonna start working out, and I was a little bitch, but I just started working out, and I was able to do a little bit, and then from there I did a little bit more. And it's the same thing when it comes to like theory or anything, and that's kind of what I did with that. Like, I just kind of slowly got interested in it. To some extent, it was myself that Yeah. So
when you talk about, and so I guess this is my point, and how I feel like we are on the same page here, except like we're getting lost in words because words suck and we're not good at it as humans. Like when you talk about pick a fucking side, like I'm saying give those people the same thing you got, right? Give them that time to find that theory, to listen to those podcasts, to talk to libertarians, to evolve. Because once we get them to that point, man, like they're all going to realize, okay, the state is the reason I'm poor. The state is the reason people are in prison. The state is the reason we're murdering people across the globe. Man, maybe we should get rid of the fucking state. Like but we got to get them to that point, because just as well as I do, the entire apparatus of the state is designed to program us from the moment we are born to buy into statism. And so we have to have gentle people. It's kind of like if you're going to talk somebody out of being in a cult, like they don't have an epiphany and go, you know what, I'm leaving the cult. You kind of have to be like, hey, doesn't this suck? Isn't this stupid? Yeah, oh, that is stupid. And they start to see and enlighten themselves, kind of like you did, and then they make the leap. So that's where I'm at, man, is like I still want to fight for those people and give them the things that they need so that they can go on that journey themselves.
And that was kind of why I brought up like where you think things are going, because I don't disagree with you, but I think it's a matter of like where are we at and where do we want to be. Gotcha. And I think we are at a time where we are in a collapsing nation. And so I'm more of in like I don't know if we
shit or get off the pot, right? Like urgency is here.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Like I think we're at a point where there's a bifurcation that's occurring, and we can either get with it or not. We can either get fucked or not. Like, so it's kind of like I get it. They're going to get people get lost along the way, but I mean, you can only do so much. Yeah, and I do think there is a place for utilizing that as well. But for me, I guess my concern, and it's kind of like, different messages, different strokes, different folks. I do think there's still a place to work with those people. But I think on the larger level, we need to have a bead on the pulse of the nation and where things are going. And I think where things are going is things are going to get fucking weird one way or another. And if we need to get with the times and get moving.
Okay. Look, and here's the thing. Like, what you're saying and having this conversation is great because it makes a lot of sense to me. Like what you're saying, I'm like, I can't fault this guy at all for what he's saying because I fucking agree with you. Like, yeah, we are not long for this world, man. Like, and so there's urgency. So it really is just we're going in the same direction. We're just in different lanes on how to handle it, but.
And I guess say something.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. No.
I was going to say also there is an aspect of selfishness to this too. And honestly, I'm an individualist. I honestly don't see that as bad. At the end of the day, I don't think there's anything wrong. I think people who say otherwise are lying to themselves. I am initially concerned myself, secondarily concerned my family, thirdly concerned with my community, and so on and so forth. It's literally I'm an egoist in a sense. It expands for myself. And, basically my family and me are basically one and the same. So that is my prime concern. And I have young children. I mean, I know you do too. I have a fucking 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, and I am fucking goddamn terrified of the future they are going to be growing up in. And
every minute of every day, it engulfs my mind, man.
To some extent, that's kind of why I'm like fucking accelerate this goddamn fucking divide, because, I don't remember what founder said it. If there's going to be war, I want it to be in my time. Like I don't want violence. But I would rather we get to a point where we can push this fucking divide to like, hey, one side or the other, and then that way I can lessen the fucking load that my children are gonna have to deal with. So I mean, it's selfish, but it is what it is.
No, you're making too much damn sense, Jose. I appreciate it. So all right. So then, what is the conclusion, my friend? What have we come to here?
I mean, I don't think we necessarily disagree. I mean, I think we have mild differences in our takes. I think we have similarities, but I don't know. I mean, that's the conclusion. It's kind of like we got to. There's no right answer here. It's really just your interpretation of it. I mean, I'm of the opinion that we need to be a little bit more extreme. It seems to be you seem to be more focused on, you know, conversion. I'm more focused on the remnant. You seem to be more focused on the conversion, and it's kind of like maybe we need to focus on giving each other room for each other. I mean, maybe, I don't know. Maybe you're. I mean, maybe you're more focused on the LP being a vehicle for conversion, whereas I mean, I guess I don't care. Like, because I don't really, I don't even want the LP to exist at all, to be personally, to be honest. So,
here's the thing: if we could, again, we're going back to the programming, right? In that people are programmed to talk about political things in terms of political parties. So if we could get them to talk about these things effectively without it being in terms of political party, I would be all for that. But the reality is it is useful to say, well, here's what we are as a party and what we believe, and allow that to kind of be that first dose. Man, I'm with you. Like, but
this is the shitty thing about political parties, because here we are, because now we have this vehicle, and like, I mean, I don't give a shit because I don't really want to use it, but like, say I did want to use it, like me and you would be at odds because I want to use this for the remnant, you want to use it for conversion, or want to prioritize conversion, whereas like, that's the beauty of if we didn't have a political party or we didn't have it, there would be more decentralization, more room for you do your message, I do mine. But now we have this thing for us to clamor over. You know what I mean? Like,
that makes a lot of sense.
Because I mean, I don't really give a shit about the Libertarian Party in that sense. Like, but I'm more trying to play devil's advocate, like in the sense of like, if I did care, or if I'm going to have some sort of messaging, but like, here's a centralized thing that is our messaging, and it's like, you know what I mean? Here we are. Like, I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong and that conversion is something that needs to happen. I prioritize the remnant because I want to fucking get a division going and be like, yo, fucking you come over here and those deists can go the fuck over here. And you're like more focused in the middle, like, hey, here, come on, buddy, pick a side. Let's what we do.
Here's what we're doing. Let me show you why this is the way, because I want our side to be bigger than theirs when that day comes. I feel like there is no power without people. It's why we believe in the free movement of labor, and we're gonna need people, and I do not want them to join those monsters, and I want them to join us.
Well, I don't know. I feel like that's probably a pretty goddamn good spot to end on.
I think so too.
Nobody's right, nobody's wrong. You want to go ahead and drop your plugs if you got any? I don't know.
So at JTodd601, I'm just a dude on Twitter. That's it. If you are interested in learning more about sales techniques and how to apply them to persuasion and stuff, I'm starting up a group within the LP of salespeople, and we're just gonna try and teach those principles. That's a Twitter account at LP_Carnegie, CARNEGIE. You can follow that there. As soon as this baby stops screaming every 10 minutes, I'm definitely going to dive in headfirst on that. And if you are in the LP and feel like it's a vehicle for change, and you're tired of the bullshit that's happened in this last week, I announced before this show that I'm running for chair right alongside Joshua Smith, so that we can at least get this thing going in the correct direction. And not throw out state affiliates over tweets, which is just complete bullshit. So get to Reno and vote for me.
You fucking status.
I know. Fucking status.
So you just have the one kid?
Yeah, just the one. He is 2.5 months old now. We're trying. Yeah, it's rough. We're trying to catch some rhythms on naps. I know that. We're just he's fighting it every step along the way, and we're like, if I hold him at this angle, will he sleep? For the love of God.
Dude, I miss those days, but don't. Those were the worst, best times.
Yeah, that's what I hear is like people miss it, but I'm sitting here in it, and I'm like, man, I just want to talk to my kid and hang out and throw a ball. Like, can we get to that already?
That's
like,
true. I will give you that. That like, because you're not even at the point where you probably maybe just
we're getting some smiles.
Yeah,
we're getting facial expressions.
So that is like, because when I first had a baby, I know this may sound shitty. When the first motherfucker popped out with my little fuck trophy, it was like, cool. Like, here's this fucking living potato that doesn't do
Yep.
anything. Like,
A bag of organs, man.
Yeah.
Like, that's all it is.
I mean,
a bag of organs
cute.
that shits on your bed. Yeah.
But like, and then once you get a few months old, it's like starts like interacting. You're like, this is fucking awesome. So it's kind of thankless initially, but yeah, that like after that first little hump, I don't know. There's something beautiful about having kids. I love it so goddamn much. I miss those times where you're at the same time. Like, God, it's so much nicer to be like, they'd be like, Dad, I'm hungry. Well, go get some fucking food.
Get some food. Yeah, go feed yourself. Oh,
because I have an 11-year-old and 8-year-old, both girls, but you know.
Oh, God bless you, man.
I know it's fucking rough.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it has its drawbacks having girls, but you know, I fucking love them and they love Dad.
Yeah.
But Jesus Christ. But anyways, my plugs, No Way Jose YouTube channel. I'm also anywhere audio podcasts are at. Hit me up at thelibertymovementglobal@gmail.com. Hit me up on Twitter. That's where I'm most active. You can just type in Jose Galison. My fucking is at Galison Jose. Give me money, patreon.com. Just No Way Jose 2020. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all that shit. And with that is that. It's been a good episode. It's been better than I thought it would. Not that I thought it was gonna be bad necessarily, but yeah,
it could have gone badly. You never know what Twitter people write.
That's what I was getting at. Where it's like great that I kind of don't really. We're not, me and you necessarily aren't really arguing over control over the party because I don't really care about the party. But like, I don't know. With that, let's go ahead and end it before we go on another tangent. All right, this is.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Boom.